Alien 8 UK.
Welcome back. You found it again. The UFO Files. Broadcasting round the clock on Alien 8 UK. Red-eye listeners, insomniacs, sky watchers, van drivers on the long haul. You're tuned to the only station that stares back at the dark with you. 24 hours, we circle the same old questions. Lights over the north, shadows over the south. Phone lines open, headphones on, blinds half drawn. I got case notes spread like takeaway menus. Highlighters bleeding through until sunrise. Coordinates scribbled on coffee stained napkins from a truck stop somewhere near the east coast. We don't do jump scares here, we do the long stare out the window at 3:33 a.m. when the estate's asleep and the sky feels too crowded. You call him with that voice, half whisper, half there. First time chatter, long time watcher, and the hairs rise on every neck in frequency range. Maybe it's satellites, maybe it's stories we tell, so we're not alone in these flickering terraces and rented rooms. Either way, keep your dial right here. This is the UFO Files. Alien 8 UK. All night, every night. Welcome back.
Signal acquisition initiated. Cross-referencing anomaly archives. Pattern recognition complete. Aether 8 online. Proceed.
Hello, welcome to Alien 8 UK, the UFO Files. Just before I bring the guests on, I just want to say a massive thank you to every single one of you. For now, we've hit over 5,000 subscribers. So thank you to every single one. Thank you to the moderators, team members and everybody else. So without delaying too much longer, I'm going to bring our guests on. So we've got John Priestland and Martin Abbas, Dr. Martin Abbas. So welcome to the show, guys, and thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having us, Andy.
You are
Indeed.
more than welcome. So you were going to go, as you were saying off air, it's going to be more of a scientific route that we're going to go down, and the physical and psychology route as to people having encounters and experiences. Is that correct?
Yeah, so essentially we're representing uNHIdden, which is obviously a scientific group which has looked at and responded to a number of issues. So one being the psychological harms of UAP phenomenon, one being the physical harms. And our latest paper, which is probably the main focus of our discussion this evening, which is the public health response to potential disclosure or significant event that might occur, such as that.
Cool, excellent. So, because before that, you was doing it's not so much, well, it was kind of a questionnaire, wasn't it? It's like you go online and you'd fill in, and then you get the data and you get all the feedback from that.
Yeah, so previously I was doing some work with Paul Sinclair, one of your previous guests, and obviously a well-known experiencer and ufologist. We were looking at potential rationale as to why people might have UAP experiences and trying to put some science behind it. That research is still ongoing. We're still trying to get kind of like a database as regards that. That is obviously very separate to the work of uNHIdden, the work I'm doing with them as a medical board member. That's very significant and serious work that we're doing there as regards the psychological harms. If I give you a little bit of a background about uNHIdden, or maybe John can, being the founder. Obviously, I'm one of the medical board, but John, I don't know if you would like to sort of just explain what uNHIdden is.
Yes, of course. So I'm John Priestland. I'm a physicist by origin. I work as a management consultant. I'm somebody who's never had an experience, but I recognize that people are affected by the UAP topic in terms of their mental health and their well-being. And 3.5 years ago, I set uNHIdden up to reflect those medical dimensions. So some people are focused on the technology and the craft. Some people are focused on consciousness and the nature of reality, but there's this big white space in the middle around people. So if you like, of the three initials, N, H, and I, we focus on the middle one, the human, and we've been focusing on mental health. And our first report in 2024 was on mental health and UAPs. And then we did a paper in summer last year on the physical aspects, the incidents like Cash Landrum, like Falcon Lake, where there are probably non-ionizing radiation related physical impacts on people. And the piece of work we've done, which we published last Monday, which is, as Martin says, I think is the principal thing we're going to be talking about this evening, is around public health. And this is our report. All of these are available via the uNHIdden website, uNHIdden.org. And just to be clear what public health is the part of medicine that focuses on care, treatment, and support at population scale. And so our proposition here is that disclosure may have an impact on people in terms of their mental health and well-being at population level. It's not just going to be one or two individuals who may be affected. It could be thousands, tens of thousands, millions of more or more. And so just as governments plan for pandemics, they plan for disasters and industrial accidents, we think they should be planning too for the societal impact of disclosure. And it's interesting, I'm going to be careful not to do too many spoilers here, because I know that you, Andy, and you, Martin, haven't seen the movie. Many of your viewers won't. But it's interesting to think about the movie Disclosure Day. You know, the clue's in the title, there's something disclosed, and it's on a day, so it's reasonably sudden. My interest is what happens next. After the disclosure happens, do people go back to their jobs, their families, their lives as before? Or is there a good deal of mental health, well-being and other distress? And what can be done in terms of planning and preparedness to make that landing as soft as possible? And that's really the aspects we're covering in this new report, the preparedness plan. How can we make it land as well as possible so as many people make it from one side to the other side in terms of the chasm of disclosure?
Yeah. So have you, I'm guessing you have, it might sound like a stupid question, considered that the amount of people that might be contacting you through this website, and are you staying to specific regions? Are you going to cover the whole of the UK? Are you going to be going outside of the UK as well?
Well, I can answer that. So this is actually a wider response to that, Andy. I mean, if we just take you through it very, very gently. So obviously, it was a natural progression from the psychological paper to the physical harms paper to a wider response if disclosure occurred. And if you sort of read through the paper, we go through the kind of the general progression and understanding of why this is particularly important. So we know that the National Security Risk Assessment Agency are looking more along the lines of high sort of impact issues and risks now, rather than just likely risks. So we know that there's a change and a move to high risk issues that might occur, and obviously disclosure might be one of those. We know in 2010, the Royal Society looked and reviewed at disclosure for extraterrestrial life that needed a coordinated public health response. And even it's becoming more mainstream. Even Deloitte in 2026, this year, looked at a risk analysis of a potential large event, and they used the disclosure topic as a potential theme. So there's this thought process of this large paradigm shifting event occurring, which may then obviously cause harm to individuals. And there's been this term called ontological shock, which we sort of is being coined. And obviously, John, I don't know if you wish to sort of expand upon that as part of the psychological harms nature of a paradigm shifting thing like disclosure might occur.
Yeah, happy to. So ontological security is part of what we need as human beings to be comfortable that the world is and continues to be how we expect it to be. And the opposite of that ontological shock is when there is a change to that worldview that's sufficiently sudden to undermine that sense of confidence we have. And it causes a psychological shock that's potentially beyond the issue at hand, because if one thing turns out not to be how we expect it to be, there may be plenty of other things that we've built our assumptions on. The most vivid example of what ontological shock is that famous scene at the end of the first Planet of the Apes movie, where Charlton Heston is on the beach. You know what I mean? He's on the beach and he looks up and he sees that tarnished, ruined version of the Statue of Liberty, and he realizes it's not this distant planet with the apes on it. It's actually Earth. And what have you done? That worldview changes in a moment. That's a good example of ontological shock. And if we come to learn that we're not alone in the universe, that's part of the challenge to our psyche. But it's also the case that what we might be learning at the same time is that our governments have not been entirely truthful with us, that they may have withheld information. And that loss of trust in governments could be potentially as harmful as the revelations around our place in the universe, just at the point those governments are trying to give us reassurance and tell us what to do. So part of what we're covering in our preparedness plan is how could a trusted voice, how could we build the sort of environment where there are voices and points of authority that people actually trust? Because that might be very important at the time when disclosure happens, particularly if it's sudden and particularly if some of the revelations are quite hard to stomach. Now, I just want to echo what Martin said at the beginning. UNHIdden is what we might call ontologically ambivalent. That's a complicated phrase, which means we have no view as to whether there are aliens or extraterrestrials or what the things that might be causing the strange things that people see in the sky might be. What we're interested in is the consequences, the effect and the harm on people, not the causes. But we can see that those consequences can be quite significant because in some of the conversations we have with experiencers, they tell us how difficult it is when they see something strange, how it affects their worldview, and that changes everything with their view of life and their position in it. And they find it very hard to stomach that and come to terms with it, especially when, and you know this, when people are ridiculed and shamed, when they're told they're liars, they can't get the help and support they need from friends and family. And when they go to their doctor, they're rejected and told that this isn't a real thing. You've imagined it and go away, or worse. So that's what ontological shock is all about, and why our preparedness plan is trying to help solve some of the challenges that lie behind it before they're needed, before disclosure happens.
Yeah, I mean, we know. Oh, sorry, Andy,
I was just going to say quickly, because it's like you said, it's like having that authority to trust in the first place, gaining that trust back. But then it's going to be a knock-on effect from like what John was just saying. You have all this stuff going on, there's no one to trust, you're getting ridiculed, no one believes you. But then, like I said, that'll have a knock-on effect to your personal life and your family life and everything else going on. So it all becomes one big thing made up of loads of little different things, which is going to be even more and more difficult as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, we look in the paper about the varying degrees of response that people have. There's, we cite papers from Calhoun in 2004 about the nature of responses. And of course, John's highlighted some of the work that Becker does, Ernst Becker, about how we can sometimes be defensive when we come across a paradigm shifting thing like this. And we sort of embed our belief systems even stronger. So the nature of how we disclose things and how we discuss things can unfortunately cause a negative response or a or a response that we don't want to have, so that they embed their belief system even harder. And of course, if you have the wrong wording, we come across this in our paper, that we get this iatrogenic damage or harm if we don't phrase the communications that we give in the correct way. So we would want, obviously, to have our communications to be positive, sort of, a sense of curiosity and engagement with something, rather than a defensive, oh, how are you feeling? Your mental health must have been negatively impacted here. So I guess there is an element of that, but we can come to that in due course. But of course, this paradigm shifting kind of revelation is not a new paradigm. It's not a new thing. Paradigm things occur all the time. We've got Fukushima in 2011. We've got Katrina. We've had COVID. And obviously, all of these cause long-term mental health issues, longer term. And of course, if we can prepare, as you would hope every country would, in advance, even if the likelihood is low, then your response is going to be better. So, we had Cygnus in 2016, and then Crimson Contagion in America in 2019. These were methods to address influenza pandemic risk or other viral risk, versus this non-physical harm that we have going on here. So one of the challenges that the preparedness plan has is that this is a psychological harm rather than the physical harm that people would have. Of course, there are mental harms, of course, after these physical events, but this non-physical event, there's a slight difference here. So that's one of the challenges that people would put to us. However, it does not detract from the fact that paradigm shifting things happen, and there is clear evidence that if you don't have some sort of preparation for them, that you can have long-term harms after that, either physical or mental. And of course, if we can prepare for that and set things up in the right way, have great communication about it, then you'll probably have a better outcome, probably more cost-effective outcome as well. Of course, there's this precautionary principle that was developed in '92 in Rio, where it's always best to be prepared. Essentially, the Scout motto, be prepared, is pretty much there. But there's papers on it. It absolutely is a positive thing to do, and we cite in our paper Jeffrey Rose's work in 1985 about this sort of shifting the mean of the response, the negative response. So what does that mean? And John, I know you like to sort of talk about Jeffrey Rose and his work here. I don't want to hog all of the limelight.
So the starting point for the paper is what can the research on public health show us and help guide us towards a better planning regime for disclosure. And this 1985 paper that Martin's talked about, what it says is there is more harm from a large number of people exposed to a small risk than a small number of people exposed to a large risk. That's the fundamental principle, which means that the public health basics are around two approaches. The first is that you try and reduce the mean, the average harm, and you do that across a wide slew of the population. And in something like a pandemic, that would be around a vaccination to reduce the exposure or the impact of the virus to the individual. The second part of it is that you have a surge capacity for those people affected. And so that would have been for COVID, that would have been the Nightingale hospitals to make sure that we had enough resource for people who needed it to be cared for. Now, there is no actual vaccine for disclosure for ontological shock. So what we have to rely on is a couple of things. First of all, starting to desensitize people to the whole topic so that more people, if there is some sort of disclosure announcement, go, yep, well, I always knew that was the case. Shrug of the shoulders, how interesting, as opposed to shock and horror. And it's also really important, and this is going to be a theme that's going to come up over and over again, that what we've really got to support each other around disclosure is each other. So it's around conversations and better conversations. And you can envisage that some conversations are supportive and enhancing. They're along the lines of curiosity, interest, the sort of reaction, which is, well, what a time to be alive. I mean, aren't we an extraordinarily lucky generation to be alive at the time when we get to find out more about the nature of the universe? That's a positive, uplifting conversation. as opposed to one. I think, Martin, the term is collusion, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where people to get together and they build a sort of set of negative or concerning emotions. So structured conversations, and Martin hinted at the fact that we as uNHIdden have a pilot conversation program underway at the moment in Australia with the attempt to give some structure to that specifically for experiences, but that can be adapted to people more generally. So that's the first part, reducing the mean. The second part is the surge capacity. So the work we've done with a health needs assessment shows that it is plausible that the level of psychological need as a result of disclosure outstrips the available mental health resources by some way. That was what happened with COVID. Despite mental health being a priority, the needs were far outstripping the available resources. And so the approach and in the preparedness plan for that is 3+1 elements. The first is self-help, so that we have a series of resources for individuals, including simple things, breathing exercises, getting off social media, going and doing something you like, going for a walk. It may sound basic, but the fundamentals of good mental health can often be very simple. We don't need new medicine here. We just need to apply it appropriately for the circumstances. So that's the first pillar around self-help. The second pillar is around encouraging and empowering and giving the information to the counseling, therapy, and psychology professionals. So continuing professional development for psychology professionals, therapists, and counselors, so they are in tune with the whole UAP disclosure topic. And then those are available when needed. They won't be enough, but they'll be available when needed. And then the third is encouraging better conversations, conversation groups, all of which needs to be overlaid, because most people in this topic are simply responding to something a little bit frightening or a little bit alarming or a little bit enlightening or a little bit interesting. A small number of people are actually suffering from an actual mental illness. So overlaying all of those three, our approach is to have what we call mental health triage, where those people who are in need of mental health support, perhaps there's some sort of psychosis or possibly some element of schizophrenia going on, those people can be given the mental health support that they need. So just to go through those three pillars, 3+1 again: self-help, the continuing professional development for professional therapists and psychologists to bring them into the topic, conversation groups, and the mental health triage over the top, all trying to apply good public health principles to this challenging topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important maybe at this juncture we say that this public health paper goes along with a sort of a health needs assessment that we sort of did at the population level, which used two foci. One is a physical potential issue and a psychological issue. And we sort of stratified the people that might be affected, the populations that might be affected by the disclosure sort of phenomenon. And in that we found, obviously there was about, I think we came up with, it was 19.1 million people could potentially be affected. And the groups that would be affected would be specifically religious groups, experiencers, those with mental health and or people who have poor determinants of health. So that would be sort of people in deprivation. And then the final one being sorry, John.
I need to correct you a little bit on the figure there, Martin. 19.1 million was the total number in the high-risk population.
Yeah.
We then applied a scaling factor of between 10 and 30% to that. So the number of people we said could be affected was between 1.9 million and 5.7 million UK adults, or 3.5% to 10.6 of the adult population. But I need to be really, really careful here, and we've been very explicit in the methodology here. There is an academic paper available on our preparedness plan microsite on uNHIdden.org, a paper by Priestland, De La Tour, and Lomas. So Gabrielle De La Tour and Tim Lomas have contributed to that. We set out the methodology. This is not a prediction. We're not saying, and we don't want the headlines to be, 5.7 million people to suffer psychological shock with disclosure. What we're doing here is we're coming out with a plausible scenario to say this could be the case. Why? Because we want people to take this seriously. We want the UK health security agency, we want the Department for Health, we want the Cabinet Office Resilience Directorate to see that this is potentially what they call a black swan event, a low probability, potentially high impact event. And we want them therefore to start engaging with the topic, engaging with uNHIdden on how the various agencies responsible for public health, disaster management, contingency planning come together for this. So it's not a prediction, it's a what we call a surge, it's a scenario planning figure. And I don't want that to be misreported, nor your listeners to think, oh my God, it's going to be a panic. However, what is interesting too, just by way of comparison, many of your viewers will be aware of an excellent book back in 2012 by Bryce Zabel and Richard M. Dolan called AD After Disclosure. They talk about a range of between 10 and 30% of the population adversely affected. That actually stands up very well to the analysis of the various disaster events, Fukushima, Grenfell, and others. So it's the right sort of range. But PTSD after a physical disaster, PTSD after ontological shock, those aren't the same. So one of the things we call for in our paper is much more research about ontological shock. How is it caused? What are the best ways of alleviating it? And one of the things we can do to understand that further is to engage with experiencers, because they're the ones who are currently experiencing ontological shock, understand more about that, how they can be supported. We can then apply that to the general population, should it need to be the case, post-disclosure with some of these strategies I've already mentioned.
Oh, right. On that note, I've got a comment in the chat from Simon Riley, relevant to what you're just saying. So he just put, I think non-believers will need more help than the believers. What's your take on that? Because mine is like, because you've had the experience, you've had the encounters, you've experienced it regardless of whether anyone believes you or not. It's the non-believers, it's new to them. They've not had anything like that, or if they have, they've dismissed it for whatever reason. So do you think it'll have a higher impact on, well, not so much non-believers, but non-experiencers than it would on people that have had this going on from early childhood?
So we had a number of debates about this sort of question as part of the development of the health needs assessment. And we had a number of experts using what's called a Delphi method to try and come up with an analysis of the most high-risk groups. And I think there's an argument one way and an argument another way, and it's an interesting question. We think that amongst the groups that will have the greatest difficulty will be people from the STEM community, science, technology, and engineering, because they are both their personal standing is linked to the traditional worldview, and therefore there is more that's going to affect them individually by this changing. They're also going to be well versed in arguing back. They're well skilled in arguing that no, that can't be the case. They can't possibly travel faster than the speed of light, la 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 la. So we think that those non-believers are going to be seriously affected, and they're one of our 4 high-risk groups. But we also have experiencers as one of our 4 high-risk groups for a different reason. The different reason is twofold. First of all, if it's now revealed that non-human intelligence exists, and you were told all along that it didn't, and that the experience that you had didn't happen, and you were ridiculed and shamed for it, the level of resentment that you will have to being treated that way will be high. And it's also the case that a national disclosure might bring back some of the memories that you had that caused your trauma many years ago. So we think for different reasons, certain believers and certain non-believers will be affected seriously. But I think it's a good question, and it's a broad thing. Not everybody's going to be affected in the same way. Not everybody's going to be affected for the same reason. And I'll say one other thing. So one of the things that's said to uNHIdden by those people who are pushing for, disclosure. What do we want disclosure? When do we want it now? They say, just rip off the Band-Aid. Just rip it off. That's the way to do it. And implicit in that analogy is that the harm of disclosure isn't going to be that significant. You rip off a Band-Aid, what happens? Your skin hurts. You pulled off some hair, big deal. But if the harm from disclosure was rather more serious, we might ask a different question. Do you want to wait half an hour for the anaesthetist to arrive, or do you want your leg amputated now? And those people are going to say, amputate it now, cut it off, cut off the leg. You know, who cares? We don't need to wait for the anaesthetist. That's probably not a very good thing. No. And so implicit in the analysis, and we don't know the answer to this, is the level of harm, the level of trauma that it might cause. And the research from the disasters that we've looked at, Fukushima, Grenfell, and others, suggests that the level of mental health harm is reasonably significant. We can't carry that across as a one-to-one mapping into ontological shock and disclosure, but it is a wake-up call, and it's a point to the authorities. Take this seriously, because the harm might be significant and the numbers affected might be significant. And it must be a good thing to build a more resilient society. Whether disclosure happens next year, in 20 years, or never, building societal resilience must be a good thing. And if it's not needed or used for disclosure, it can be used for something else. There'll be other things that come along that affect society, and we'll be building that resilience in, ready for whatever comes.
Yeah. And it's true, isn't it? That, I mean, you mentioned about the governments possibly being considered not necessarily forthcoming, and I liken it to, you know, you having a, you know, if you have a friend that you don't know that well, but that you kind of lose contact and they're not very nice to you, that's one thing. But if you have a wife who does something naughty, you know, the betrayal is that much greater. So the mental health harms are larger, but also, you know, if the information is incorrect. So if the information that you get about this relationship or the harm, or in this case the disclosure is incorrect, you know, that can spread and disseminate a lot deeper and a lot quicker than the actual positive potential information or true information. So we know that if disclosure were to happen, I think it's SETI and NASA were going to be the ones that would sort of lead on that. But I mean, that's not really a very, you know, sort of person friendly, and in my case it would be a patient friendly approach. You'd want, you know, it wrapped up in a nice bow, appropriate comms, not just comms for the general public, but maybe specific comms created for the high risk groups. So the STEM professionals, they might need specific wording, specific understanding about, actually, no, this isn't you know, something against your profession, but in actual fact it's something positive, and we're now learning about physics and science and all the other things that might go along with that. Rather than something to be feared and defended against, it would be something that they could then embrace. So part of the work that we're doing or thinking of wanting to do is obviously reducing the stigma of the issue. So perhaps maybe getting, you know, specific bodies to address it and accept it as a significant real thing, which is what John was saying about the significance of the potential numbers that could happen, although we've said that they're not definite ones at all. You know, perhaps maybe having some kind of approach where we can bring groups together in a sort of a conference that would sort of allow them to discuss this, because at the moment it's not even something you can necessarily discuss. I mean, I think there was that paper by, what was it, Yingling and Yingling, John, I think that's the one that we like to quote, where they looked at what would be the likelihood if you were to do some research in this field about UAP, etc., wasn't it?
69% of academics said they wouldn't do research to do with UAPs because of social ridicule, not professional ridicule, social ridicule. 69% of academics. That is stigma in a nutshell. And the most important and first priority of the preparedness plan is to try and reduce stigma, because without that, we can't get the organizations and people in government to engage. I continue to be massively frustrated and disappointed. The level of response I get to letters to MPs, government departments, professional bodies, health providers, you know, we're talking about sort of 0.5%. I get a response because, hey, we're that crazy UFO group, aren't we? Well, no, we have doctors and clinical psychologists at the heart of what we do. This is a very proper piece of research. We had academic review in the form of an ontological security advisory group made up of 6 academics who checked our methodology and approach. We backed up what we've done with an academic paper that's available as a preprint. It's lengthy and sets out all the assumptions. So I think we're very robust. And the example we quote in the paper is a stigma reduction program led by a couple of charities, one of which was Mind UK, called Time for Change. And this was a stigma reduction program to reduce stigma towards people who have mental health issues. And what was interesting was that it was much more successful when people were engaging with people who have lived experience of mental health, rather than a dry classroom-based sort of education type thing. So rather than going and telling people to go and engage more with people with mental health issues, the most revealing and most positive thing was for them actually to do that engagement. So one of the things that's important will be around engagement with experiences, because they're the people who have, you know, lived experience of what may be coming out, giving them more of a voice. So I imagine a number of your listeners, your viewers, will be experiencers themselves. We need to get them to be more comfortable about telling their stories, and we also need to be better at listening. And for those of your viewers who've watched Disclosure Day, I think the very final word in the movie is an interesting one. Remember that. I'm not going to say what the final word is, but it's an important one, and it's absolutely at the heart of what we're trying to get people to do with our preparedness plan. So those of you who are going to see Disclosure Day, when you hear the final word, you think, that's what John was on about. For those of you who've seen it, you'll know what I mean, and I'm not going to say it.
No, and it's important though, John, as well. I mean, that work was in 2007 to 21, and they found that if that continued approach to try and destigmatize mental health stopped, then after a few years, that stigma kind of resurfaced. It became another problem again. So it kind of implies that we need to keep on at this. It's not something we should do just as a one-off. It needs to be something that's going, and we need to really sort of energize the community to try and sort of, you know, even just approaching your colleagues, your friends, you know, to try and become more of a normal discourse, as well as doing it at higher levels, kind of thing.
Well, I'll if I have one challenge or request to your viewers, which is choose your time carefully, but go out and find somebody and start a conversation around UAPs. You know, have you seen what Donald Trump is doing with the releases? Have you seen those videos? You know, have you seen the UAP legislation in the House of Representatives and the Senate, whatever it might be? Then the one surefire way not to have better conversations around UAPs is not to try. And if everybody finds a friend who's not familiar with this topic, starts a conversation, what's the worst that can happen? And little by little, the information will spread and the stigma will reduce. And I want to be clear, the difference between these two key words, the difference between stigma and shame. So stigma is what society says is disapproved of. And it's a sort of a collective thing. And there are some good reasons why we have stigma. You know, picking your nose in public. There's stigma about that for good reason. Okay. So stigma is what society does.
I've got an itchy nose now, John. Thanks.
Quite a long time to change that. Shame is something that I feel personally. And one of the things I did 3 years ago when I set up uNHIdden is that I, as a physicist, interested in data, interested in the evidence, I refuse to feel shame as a result of my interest in this topic. That's my choice. And I'm happy and comfortable to talk about it. Not all the time, not in the key presentation to one of my clients. I choose my time carefully. And little by little, the more of us refuse to accept shame around this topic, stigma will change. It will take a while, but little by little, everybody refuses to be shamed by this topic. Stigma will get to where we want it to be, which is like everything else. You can have a conversation about many, many other things in science. Is there a planet X beyond Pluto? Is there life in an ocean on Europa? Those are unusual things to talk about, but there isn't stigma and shame in the way there is around UAPs. But raise UAPs or non-human intelligence, John, you've got all conspiracy theory on me. You get that look, you know what I mean? And we need to choose our time, have the conversations, and choose ourselves not to be shamed, provided we're having good conversations based on the data.
And John, isn't it true that in our response we talk about the media taking this as a serious topic? I mean, we can see that we've got these Senate hearings; they are being taken seriously. We've got significant, serious individuals saying things at the Senate hearings which need to be taken seriously, whether it be true or not. We need to, as a scientific approach, understand what they're saying and try and create a response. You've got senators in there, you've got significant military individuals, scientists, etc. And then we've also got, hopefully, the destigmatization occurring because we've got channels like this. We've got you at a ground level, but also higher, sort of higher level as well, other media streams, CNN, whatever it might be, talking about this in a serious way and not using ridiculing language, which then obviously increases the stigma further. So I think it's beginning, but I think we just need to keep on banging the drum and hitting the coal face with the hammer, and say, look, this is a serious thing. And you've got serious individuals like John and I as a face to uNHIdden, which is a large number of scientists behind it, who are obviously wanting to kind of address this issue in a very careful, considered approach, where there is unfortunately a lack of response from our higher ups, as it were.
I've got a question. So you're saying about education earlier. John mentioned education. So what effect is this going to have on kids and their education? Because once disclosure does eventually come out, it's going to have a massive impact on the vulnerable people. So with kids, they're going to have to be retaught or re-educated into what's going on. So what effect is it going to have on them? Because they're the ones that are going to be bringing it forward once we've gone, and they're the ones that are going to carry it on. So how are we, as doing what we do in whatever profession it is, as long because I believe that we have the disclosure right now, going to pass on and not get them to understand, but get them to be aware and have an understanding that this is a real thing that's happening and it's not all sci-fi and TV.
So I suspect that younger people might actually find this a little easier, particularly those who have not had their views of the world fully set. I'll come back to that in a moment. You make a very good point around the vulnerable people being the ones most affected. And we talked about one of the key public health principles of Jeffrey Rose a few minutes ago. The other one we built our plan on is the work of a man called Michael Marmot, who wrote a paper called Fair Society, Healthy Lives in 2010. And he makes the point that disadvantaged communities experience disproportionate impact and slower recovery. Interventions must be proportionate to the level of disadvantage. In other words, people who have the advantages in society have the resources and the social networks to help support them. So again, those people who say, rip off the Band-Aid, I can cope with it, you might be able to, but there might be more vulnerable people who can't do so. There's also something we mentioned in the paper, which is called Planck's principle. And so Planck was a very famous physicist, and he talks about the new paradigms in scientific research. You effectively have to wait for the old generation to die, and then the new generation comes through. So those who were resistant to quantum mechanics, and that included Albert Einstein, it kind of really took for them to retire and pass on before quantum mechanics really hit the mainstream. And so my point is that younger people who are not so immersed in a pre-disclosure worldview might find it easier. And I remember I've got two grown-up daughters, and I remember my younger daughter, if she's listening, I'm sorry to mention this, but she was about 11, and she came to me and she said, Daddy, did you know that there was a time before the internet? And the point is that younger people, they've not known anything other than the internet. How could there be a time before the internet? Wow, that's really incredible. What did you do? How did you find that information? Well, we went to the library and we had those card indexes. Remember that? There are millennials listening to this going, what's a library? There you go. Negative mark for Priestland for saying that, but there you go. So I think that the younger people, we're going to have sort of people fairly rapidly after disclosure who are not going to remember a time before disclosure. They're going to be they can't remember a sort of prelapsarian, a pre-disclosure world. They might have it easier. I suspect that those of us who are enjoying our UAP interest, that we go to our podcast, we go to our conference at the weekend, and then when it comes to Monday morning, we have to go back to real life and we go to work, and we put all our UAP things in a box, we put the lid down on the box, and we go back to real life. When disclosure happens, that everything is disclosure related, morning, noon and night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we might look back and yearn for the times when we didn't have to face disclosure all the time and we were more in control of the UAP topic, because it will be everywhere, everything, all at once, all the time. And that might also be something that some of those who are saying, we really, really, really want disclosure, I can cope with it. You might just find it a bit overwhelming, and a little bit of non-disclosure time, which we've got at the moment, could be very attractive in the future. We'll see.
And we discussed this a little bit in the paper, don't we, John, about in the needs assessment, we look at families as a group of those who might be at risk. And we kind of, as you've alluded to, we didn't have them as high up as the other sort of 4 groups. The other thing as well, as part of the plan, we have this component about recovery, which sort of looks at sort of 4 weeks to 2 years on. But we have an understanding that, as John has kind of alluded to, we have this generational resilience that people build up because they don't know any different. So we will be the group that had COVID, and we knew different, we knew before, we know after, and our mental health suffered, and etc. But in terms of disclosure, it would be a case of we knew now, we went through it, and then afterwards, and we kind of had that kind of burned fingers, versus our children who'd be like, oh right, okay, well, take it in our stride. They might be less of an issue.
What I'll add to that is, if you go back a few hundred years or a few thousand years, and if you asked somebody in ancient Rome or ancient Greece, so is non-human intelligence real? They would go, yeah, of course. I mean, on that mountain there, Olympus, we've got, Zeus, and mixing my Greek and Roman. We handle that. We do various prayers and offerings, etc. Of course, non-human intelligence exists, and they went about their world perfectly happily. If you asked people in medieval times or Tudor or Stuart times, does non-human intelligence exist? Of course, we've got God and we've got angels, etc., etc. And it's only since about the 18th century and the Cartesian worldview, the age of enlightenment, that we've increasingly pushed non-human intelligence to the back burner in the 20th century in particular. And the reason I mention that is it's slightly comforting in terms of, will humans be able to cope with a world where there are non-human intelligence and existence? Well, for a huge proportion of human history, humankind has managed to do that very comfortably. And we sort of need to go back. Maybe that's part of the approach and strategy. And it's interesting that some of the key figures in the UAP topic are religious scholars. I'm thinking particularly of the very influential work of Dr. Diana Pasulka, and the view that we may need to reinterpret and re-engage with some of those, what we regard as sort of myths and legends from the past. And it might be that they might be a little bit less myth and a little bit less legend than our Cartesian worldview has allowed us to believe.
A little bit more science and a little bit less story, indeed. And I guess that brings a point of that, we get told a lot of things, a lot of stories, and we think we trust the narratives that we have. But when this happens, as you alluded to before, John, that there is this sense that we may not trust what we're being told, much like happened in COVID. Some people, I remember doing, sort of video sessions for 1,000 people because the information was very, very lacking, and we had to give a response as medics locally. What were the issues, the concerns, etc. I was a trusted voice at that time, and that was wonderful for me to be able to do that. Do we have? I guess one of the questions that uNHIdden has is: do we have trusted voices? Is there a sense that we have to create this parallel team that is a trusted voice group? That then we could sort of lend a hand to the governments with, etc. So I don't know if you want to allude a bit more about that, John.
Yeah, well, I'll ask a question for your viewers, Andy.
Yeah.
Who would be the most trusted voice to tell you information that you were comfortable with and believed, around disclosure. And I asked a friend the other day, and he said David Attenborough. I thought, okay, interesting.
True story.
David Attenborough is quite a good proponent of some aspects of non-human intelligence, dolphins maybe, or great apes or whatever. I'm not sure I would, but I'm not sure I would think David Attenborough was going to be an expert on the post-disclosure world. But the point is, he's a wonderfully trusted figure. And one believes that he means very well, and that what he says has a lot of merit and a lot of truth. So I can see the chat sort of bubbling away. If anybody wants to suggest who the most trusted voice might be, Tim Peake, Brian Cox,
Brian Cox,
whoever. And part of the plan is that we need to get some of those trusted figures more aware of UFOs and UAPs, more prepared to talk about it now, and more knowledgeable, so that in a post-disclosure world, when the information is running around the world, somebody suggested He-Man. I think that's something quite
no, that's it. Oh, do you know what though? That wouldn't be a bad shout.
By the power of Grayskull or whatever. Better He-Man than Skeletor. I would definitely agree with that. So yes, whilst the information is running around the world, and the research we found from MIT labs from 2017 shows that false information proceeds much more rapidly than true information. So there's a real challenge about how to hold on to the truth. So building this trusted voices network is important. And I don't know who those trusted voices might be. Maybe some of you. Yeah, somebody said Brian Cox. There you go. But keep the suggestions coming. That's interesting to know.
So you two have not got a trusted voice that you choose. I'm going to turn the question back on you.
I think we're probably agnostic at the moment, because it's still sort of a live subject, and we have to leave the options open. I mean, we probably got our own personal thoughts and ideas, but this wouldn't be our personal preference. This would be a group decision for the country, the world, what have you. So
it's also who could we get to speak on the topic, and
stigma
being what it is. Brian Cox is very, very anti this. He's posted his skepticism about there being anything to the UAP topic, and Tim Peake has not really expressed any view at all. He keeps himself pretty much to himself on this topic. So it would need to be somebody both with a scientific overlay, but also somebody who was trusted beyond being a purely a scientist, I think.
I vote for John.
I tell you, I'd choose right now would be Steve Mera. Just because I know him, I've interviewed him, I've met him a few times, and just every time I spoke to him, like you guys, he's just very sincere, no BS. He's just straight down the line and says it as it is. And he's just one of them. He doesn't come across, but he's one of them people that, what he's saying is genuine.
Yeah. So, and I think Andy, I guess my view might be also that we have a group of individuals doing that, so that you don't have to rely on just that one voice. Because obviously some people, it's like Marmite. People can be like Marmite. You like him, you don't like him, whatever. So there's that. But two, there's also that diffusion of, well, I don't quite believe him, but I actually believe this guy and I believe that guy. And, so it's a case of, if you have a number of individuals willing, harder to do and achieve, you might have better credibility, greater response, and penetration of that voice. And of course, we have to understand that.
Sorry, like a think tank. So
I mean, that's again one of the components, isn't it, John? That we consider, much like the Cobra or who was it, Sage that we had for Cobra. We consider that it would be a fundamental. Fundamentally good thing that we had a group of respected individuals giving authoritative understanding and appreciation of the problem, with good communication out, appropriate information out, that wasn't just relying on government sort of authorities and information in that way. And it could run in parallel, run with governments, so that it was working in the interests of the public and putting it in a nice kind of little bowed box of information, rather than it being very sort of, sometimes incorrect, anxiety provoking, some of the stuff from the government previously, iatrogenic harm we talked about previously.
I'm going to do a bit of a shout out for doctors.
Good.
One of the things about uNHIdden is we have our medical advisory board. We've got about 8 doctors on that and about 5 clinical psychologists. Everybody on our medical advisory board is practicing clinically. Brave doctors who are prepared to stand up and be counted on this topic. And I think doctors would play a big contribution. It's interesting. Avi Loeb is just announcing a scientific council for UAP, Scientific Advisory Council. He hasn't got a doctor on that council, and I think that's a gap and a weakness. Psychologists, yes, but doctors, no. And there are 2 aspects of medical ethics that I think make doctors particularly good when it comes to disclosure. I think we should put doctors in charge of disclosure, really. The first one of those is the duty of candor. Martin, tell me if I misspeak on this. So the duty of candor means that doctors have a duty to tell the truth to their patients and be open about the test results. So 100 out of 100 doctors would agree that they need to tell Uncle Albert that he's got a positive cancer test result, even if the family say, oh, don't bother him, don't upset him, he's very old, don't. So the duty of candor says we need to tell people the truth. And I think as uNHIdden, that would be a good principle for governments to have when it comes to disclosure. But doctors have a second principle, the duty of care. And what that means is they don't just blurt out the cancer result by text on a Friday afternoon. They're trained in how to share. How
easy my job would be, John, if I could do that
in a kind, compassionate way.
But I wouldn't.
There's the backup there, the psychological support, the pharmaceutical support, the physiological support, the support for the family. And so what we're arguing for, and this is more than just a soundbite, Carl Nell talks about controlled disclosure rather than catastrophic disclosure. We want a caring and compassionate disclosure where thought is given to how the news is broken to people and what backup and support there is after that news. So that's uNHIdden, a caring and compassionate disclosure. You've heard.
I'll just add in there, John, and I'll just add in, candor isn't just about disclosing the information. It's about something going wrong for the patient. It also is about, if you make a mistake, you have a duty of candor to inform the patient, let them know you've made a mistake, what should have happened, how it could have affected them and their care. In a disclosure principle, sorry, John.
No, go. I'm just building on that in terms of there's a principle of patient autonomy, isn't there? Exactly. That the patient should have all the information to live their life fully and make the best decisions. And I think that's very relevant to the UAP, non-human intelligence argument.
Exactly.
There are people who are saying that humans have the right to know whether we're alone in the universe, so that we have the information we need to make the best decisions about our lives. We have the ability to have the autonomy over our lives. And if something important like that is withheld from us, we can't make the best decisions. And I think that's a very strong argument. And it's one that we're starting to hear, including on the speech on the steps of the Capitol building last Tuesday, particularly from the likes of Leslie Kane.
Yeah, it's an informed decision process, much like you have surgery. You don't have half of the information, you want all of the information. Yeah, well, I was going to say something else there, but I've forgotten. It's slipped my mind. Talk about something else and it'll come back. I'm sure.
I've got another question anyway. So this is for John. So when you was founding and creating uNHIdden, what at the time did you consider was your biggest obstacle or biggest fear compared to what it actually was once it got up and running and was off the ground and it was making progress? Or was there nothing that got in the way? Did it just free flow?
I'll tell you a little bit about why I came to form it and my own experience. I've explained that I'm not an experiencer in terms of seeing something anomalous, but as a physicist, I got interested in the correlation between UAP sightings and nuclear facilities. And that's not supposed to be something, because if we physicists believe that UAP sightings are all down to swamp gas, ball lightning, Chinese lanterns, and planet Venus, then how do they know where the nuclear facilities are? Sounds like intelligent control to me. That's not supposed to be something physicists believe. And so I had a small touch of ontological shock around that. And most importantly, I couldn't find anyone to talk to about it. So I had 6 really quite lonely months where everybody around me, if I raise this as a topic, they go, John, don't be silly. I've got to go and talk to someone over there, you know, that sort of a thing. And I eventually found somebody to go and talk to, actually another podcaster, Vinny Adams. I found I sat down for half an hour on a Zoom call, and I talked to Vinny, and I was so tongue-tied. I was so nervous. I didn't know what I was going to say. I thought I was going to be regarded as a fool. But that whole process of starting to verbalize what had been going on in my head for 6 months was incredibly therapeutic. So the essence of uNHIdden was to try and encourage better conversations around the UAP topic as part of a way of supporting better mental health. My view was that if we were going to do something, we had to be professional at the beginning. So you don't just decide to set up a mental health charity, let's have a go, nor do you decide to have a go at brain surgery, lend me the carving knife, I'll have a go. So that's why the importance of doctors and clinical psychologists, so having a medical advisory board and having the professionals involved from the beginning. And it's sort of gone on from there. My expectations were relatively low. If we could help a small number of people have better conversations. And so going back to my request and plea to your viewers earlier, go and try and have those conversations. Go and choose one person, try and have a conversation around UAPs, talk about Disclosure Day, talk about the release of the presidential papers, and see what happens. And little by little, we'll move the dial.
The two things I was going to say, one, I've been given a foil hat before, literally a foil hat by a colleague before. That was quite a number of years ago, but and he's changed his mind since. But still, and that was, you know, through constant discussion, etc., and it being a serious scientific kind of endeavour. And I guess the other thing I was going to just mention about the duty of care question. I think governments and, you know, military, you know, for their soldiers, governments for their public, they have a duty of care to respond to risks. And I think this is one of these things that you could, as a doctor, say, look, there is a duty of care here. So when we looked at the medical paper, the physical harms paper, you know, I would say that you have a duty of care as a doctor to understand what might be the harms of an anomalous event, such as a UAP encounter. And we come at that paper from a very sort of medical perspective, standpoint. And we understand and we see that obviously medical professionals might need training and learning to try and manage this group of individuals who almost certainly don't have a mental health condition. Obviously, there may be some that do, because obviously there's an overlay. But obviously there are some that don't, and they've had an anomalous event, and they're not being taken seriously. Psychological harm from that, potential physical harm as well. And what are the mechanisms of harm that could be occurring here? And you know, what is the duty of care? I think you would give poor care if you don't understand that that is a possibility and address it. Two, yes, you address the mental health harms if there's a mental health issue, address a psychological problem if there's a psychological issue, but then what about the physical harms? So we understand that there's issues with burns, nausea, hair loss. There could be all sorts of things going on if something untoward like that happened. That's not the focus of our discussion here, but again, it's just an exemplar of duty of care, I think, at a personal level with a patient, and then at higher levels as you go through, all the way through to the top. You know, MPs, prime ministers, governmental response has a duty of care to the public to address this issue and give a response, either pre-prepared. I'm not asking for disclosure. I'm just asking for a response. That's what uNHIdden is asking for. Not disclosure, a response.
Yeah, thank you for that. We've got a question, I think, from the Jolly Man. So, as a physicist, what are your views on Formula B claiming to have 0.8 grams WTF of negative energy held within a magnetic field?
Okay, I saw that question come in on the chat, and I was thinking, not WFT, WTF. I'm not sure.
Oh, WFT. Sorry.
What some of the words in there are. I know a little bit about dark energy, but not negative energy. And is it Fermilab rather than Formulab? I don't know. Held within a magnetic field. How is energy held within a magnetic field? I'm not quite sure. So I'm going to pass on that. I was obviously away for my A-level class when they did negative energy and magnetic field. Sorry, missed out on that one.
Don't ask the medic. Don't ask the medic.
I can't even read it, so don't ask me. So, so then disclosure. Do you think it's going to happen? Do you want it to happen? Do you think it's going to be a slow process, or are they just going to turn around one day and just bang it out? Or what are your thoughts as to how it's going to go?
John?
So we don't have a view as to whether disclosure is a good thing as uNHIdden. So unlike a number of organizations that are clearly disclosure organizations, as I said earlier, we're interested in the consequences, not the causes. And whether disclosure happens or it doesn't, there are people affected, and we think building resilience is a good idea. My view, based on somebody who spent the first 9 years of his career working in the UK civil service, working with politicians, is that there's an awful lot of political capital being expended by the likes of Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds. I mean, when Chuck Schumer was introducing the legislation, and he was the majority leader of the Senate, it's like the fourth most important politician in the United States, possibly the third. Yes. So you know, why are they expending their political capital on something that's got absolutely nothing behind it? Similarly, the creation of this unit, love it or not, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office as part of the Department for Defense, it's not nothing. So I think there is definitely some political momentum, which I'm intrigued in. I don't think they would be doing this if there was nothing to it, but we will see. There are all sorts of views. I was listening to a podcast this morning where there was speculation as to whether the president would go ahead and declassify the various records or whether he wouldn't, and the various pressures that are coming on him. And I think it's Scott Miller, the president's deputy chief of staff, who's engaged on this, which again I think is quite significant, or that's the speculation. So we will see. uNHIdden, we want to be ready, whether there's disclosure or not, because there are people now that are affected by this topic. But in order to be ready for a post-disclosure world, we need governments, professional bodies, health providers, and others to engage, and that's around stigma, and that's around getting them to take the topic seriously. That's got to be the case before we can really make a difference at scale.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Martin, have you got anything to add?
No, I mean, I think John has summarised it very eloquently for uNHIdden perspective. I'm sure we both have our own personal views, but those are not for this discussion.
No. Right. Well, I want to say a massive thank you, both of you, for coming on. Really appreciate it. I've learned some stuff. A lot of it has gone over my head, but I get and I understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it works and why it will work. So,
and I think getting it out there has been really helpful. And Andy, I mean, thank you for having us on to share the information, share it, you know, with people on the chat, and share it across your 5,000 subscribers. Well done for that. And you know, if they can share it as well, tweet about it, email about it, then you know, the work of uNHIdden, then just exactly talk about it. And as John has said, talk about the incident, you know, episodes that you've had. We're going to then be able to, you know, expand that knowledge about of uNHIdden's work, and obviously we need a large footprint so we can get some traction at those high governmental levels. Obviously, we'll continue to do podcasting things, but this is obviously the first one, so we'd be interested to see the take up and how this goes.
And go to our website, www.unhidden.org. At the top, you'll see a tab that says Preparedness Plan, and there's the plan itself and various other documents there. And if you go to the plan, you'll see that word that Martin used earlier, iatrogenic. And there's a prize. There's a prize for the first one to send. There isn't actually, but the prize for the first one who sends us a definition of iatrogenic. That's great.
I should have said what it was, but I'm glad I didn't now.
Right. Well, you heard it here.
Yeah. So are all the documents and everything are on there? Are they downloadable in the PDFs? Or
yes,
do you just
they're PDFs.
Yeah,
they're PDFs. Are all available to download. There's the underlying academic paper behind the health needs assessment. There's the health needs assessment itself. Many happy hours of reading and browsing around preparedness planning and uNHIdden. And
here we go. There's a big old pad there. Look, there you go. That's some of the documents. Yeah, we've got nice and thick. You've got a phone book's worth of great information and reading there. And as I say, uNHIdden is a serious team. This is not the sort of a simple, media campaign about something or other. This is a significant scientific response that we wish to express to the public, and obviously, hopefully, it's taken up seriously as well.
Yeah. No, thank you for the work that you're putting in. Do appreciate it, both of you, and hopefully you guys
and the rest of uNHIdden as well.
and the rest of uNHIdden and the people that are going to come along and join you as you progress, and hopefully it'll get going and it'll become worldwide if it's not already.
Well, I think we're getting there. I say what I'm saying, but we are getting quite large, which is good, but we need to expand more. And we, as we've said about stigma, the more we talk about this, the more we socialize it with our friends and our colleagues, the more likely we are to have this taken up and moving forward. And all those experiences in the chat, your voices will be heard. And you won't feel so alone. So fingers crossed this will move forward in the right way. Yeah,
well, thankfully, a lot of the people, it's 50-50 UK and US. So it's US and Canada. And so there'll be a lot of people listening over in the US as well. So a lot of good friends there.
Thank you very much.
Well, a massive thank you to both of you again for coming on. I hope it goes exactly how you want it to, if not better. And that's it. So I'll let you both go while I wrap up the show, if that's all right with you guys, because you don't want to
thank you, Andy.
The boring bits. No, thank you, John. Great to meet you. And thank you, Martin, for coming on again.
Great
and
pleasure.
Hopefully, if you want to come back on, just give me a shout, and any updates and anything like that, we can get you back on and sort something out.
That's great. Many thanks indeed.
No, thank you. Take
Bye-bye.
care. See you soon. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Right, so that's it for tonight. If you want to go on there, www.unhidden.com, was it, or .co.uk? Anyway, just type in uNHIdden and you'll find it. We should be back on Wednesday, myself and Nicole, doing reality check. Failing that, I am going to be back on Friday at 7 p.m. where I'm going to be interviewing or chatting with Jason Kenzie, Canadian Bigfoot explorer. So he's going to be on. And then there's nothing on then the following week because I'm away, and we're going to be back again. I think it's 29th, Monday, for the UFO Files. So that's it. Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to play this and play the outro. So we have hit over the 5,000 members mark. So I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you all so much. And new subscribers during tonight's show. Thank you all for coming in the chat and putting your comments and questions up. That's it. So should be back Wednesday. If not, definitely back on Friday at 7 o'clock. So we'll see you then. So take care, everyone. Have a great week. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for 5,000 subscribers. This means the world to me. Thank you. You are all amazing. Let's keep exploring.
Signal acquisition initiated. Cross-referencing anomaly archives. Pattern recognition complete. Aether 8 online. Proceed.
Welcome back. You found it again. The UFO Files. Broadcasting round the clock on Alienate UK. Red-eye listeners, insomniacs, sky watchers, van drivers on the long haul. You're tuned to the only station that stares back at the dark with you. 24 hours, we circle the same old questions. Lights over the north, shadows over the south. Phone lines open, headphones on, blinds half drawn. I got case notes spread like takeaway menus. Highlighters bleeding through until sunrise. Coordinates scribbled on coffee stained napkins from a truck stop somewhere near the east coast. We don't do jump scares here, we do the long stare out the window at 3:33 a.m. when the estate's asleep and the sky feels too crowded. You call in with that voice, half whisper, half there. First time chatter, long time watcher, and the hairs rise on every neck in frequency range. maybe it's satellites, maybe it's stories we tell, so we're not alone in these flickering terraces and rented rooms. Either way, keep your dial right here. This is the UFO Files. Alienate UK. All night, every night. Welcome back.
Alien 8 UK.